Good morning. My name is Carlos Peña. I'm from the Food and Drug Administration. As the introduction had indicated, I'm from the Office of the Chief Scientist in the Office of the Commissioner. And for some background, I came through the agency through the Center for Devices by way of the National Institutes of Health. Prior to that, where I worked with neurological products, some of which contain small molecules in various combination frameworks. And then I moved to the Office of the Commissioner to get a broader perspective of different product areas. And nanotechnology, apparently it's very much of interest here, and it's very much of an active evaluation process at the agency. I hope that my presentation lives up to the expectations that appear to precede me at this conference. First slide. So for an outline, today I plan to provide a little bit about the FDA perspective on nanotechnology, beginning with the broader umbrella of how nanotechnology activities are coordinated across the U.S. government, the U.S. National Nanotechnology Initiative. I'll then provide a background on FDA's mission and organization, including a discussion of regulatory science, and a move to a description about the FDA Nanotechnology Task Force that still exists today. I'll discuss their findings and recommendations identified in that 2007 report, with the understanding that it's been 3 years since that report, and the current challenges and research activities that impacts the products FDA regulates today and moving forward in this emerging science field. It may also be helpful to know that despite the report being issued in 2007, FDA continues to evaluate these new perspectives, new science, new issues that come to light today. And so I'll be discussing a few new capacity-building activities at the agency focused on regulatory research. And then I'll end with a few final thoughts. And just for some background, my role within the Chief Scientist is managing the Nanotechnology Task Force, coordinating their monthly activities, as well as the subcommittees that exist to communicate, cooperate, share experience, share expertise across the agency. So the National Nanotechnology Initiative is a U.S. program established in 2001 to coordinate the U.S. government multi-agency efforts in nanoscale science, engineering, and technology, as well as manage nanotechnology research and development across the different agencies that comprise the U.S. government. And the NNI provides a vision of the long-term opportunities and benefits of nanotechnology in the U.S. for those agencies that wish to participate. My organization, the FDA, is one of several organizational members in the NNI that meet regularly each month. The goals of the NNI are the following: advance a world-class nanotechnology research and development program, foster the transfer of new technologies into products for commercial and public benefit, develop and sustain educational resources, a skilled workforce, and the supporting infrastructure and tools to advance nanotechnology, and support responsible development of nanotechnology. And I would like to especially highlight the fostering the transfer of new technologies into products for commercial and public benefit, and supporting responsible development of nanotechnology, since FDA takes both goals seriously, and both are applicable to FDA's mission, which I will discuss next. So although small in size, FDA protects consumers in the United States with a broad umbrella of safeguards for the myriad products FDA regulates. The FDA is responsible for protecting the public health by assuring the safety, efficacy, and security of drugs, biologics, medical devices, our nation's food supply, cosmetics, and products that emit radiation. The FDA is also responsible for advancing the public health by helping to speed innovations that are more effective, safer, and more affordable, and helping the public get the accurate, science-based information they need to use in medicines and foods to improve their health. Most new products, such as those that are designed to treat human conditions or diseases, include those that may contain nanomaterials and are reviewed by FDA's reviewers for safety and effectiveness before they can be made available to consumers, and this is on a product-by-product basis. To be approved, drugs and medical devices must meet FDA standards for approval, and they must continue to meet them while they are on the market. FDA regulates products in accordance with its statutory authorities and mandates. Pre-market authorization by FDA is required for some products can be marketed, such as drugs, devices, biologics products, and food additives, Others, such as we've just heard in the previous discussion, such as cosmetics and dietary supplements, can be marketed without prior FDA approval. We have no regulatory pre-market approval in those areas, though their manufacturers are still legally required to ensure that they are safe. And I'll come back to that. To meet its mission statement, the agency conducts these oversight functions under a variety of laws and regulations, which establish the specific pre-market or post-market oversight mechanisms applicable to a particular class of products. Most of the laws and regulations under which FDA operates were written before the advent of nanotechnology, as well as other emerging technologies. And just recently, the Science Board of the FDA and Advisory Committee also commented that nanotechnology was one of several emerging science technologies that the FDA should take notice to. And we do so, but we want to make sure that we can manage different emerging science technologies using a single framework if possible, and adapting that framework when and where it's needed. Here I would like for you to note the scope of the products that we regulate, and many can be applied and are relevant to nanotechnology. And I'll also add another bullet that was just recently added, tobacco products. The take-home message is that this slide, better than anything else, defines the scope of concern for which FDA has oversight. And I'd also like to note that FDA is centered around 3 core business functions, including pre-market review, which is assessment of safety and effectiveness of new medical technology and the safety of new food ingredients, product safety and compliance, which is the inspection of manufacturing facilities and products to assure safety, quality, and compliance with FDA regulations, and consumer and patient safety, post-marketing surveillance to ensure that the safety of consumers and patients who use FDA-regulated products. And again, these core business functions can be applicable to nanotechnology as well. Now, at this time, it might be helpful to know a little bit more about the organization of FDA and how it is divided into different product areas as I move to discussing more in detail the different product areas that could be affected by nanotechnology. The FDA is an agency within the Department of Health and Human Services and consists of a number of centers and offices. And in this diagram, I've outlined just the 6 product centers, and they include the Center for Drugs, Center for Biologics, Center for Devices, Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, Center for Veterinary Medicine, and Center for Tobacco Products. Other major components of the FDA include the National Center for Toxicological Research, a research hub of the agency, and I'll come back to that when I talk about proposed research plan for the agency in nano, and our Office of Regulatory Affairs, the compliance and enforcement arm of the agency. Within our Office of the Commissioner, the Office of the Chief Scientist resides where I am located, and our office provides management and oversight on a number of agency-wide issues, including those issues that cross more than one product center. So, for example, the Nanotechnology Task Force is one of several working groups with staff from across the different product centers at FDA and managed centrally within the Office of the Chief Scientist. So with an understanding, with an emerging technology like nanotechnology, how do we address the needs to successfully carry out our mission in the many product areas that can be touched by nano? High on the list is characterization of nanotechnology-based products. Also important is developing of models for safety and efficacy assessments. Study behavior of nanomaterials in biological systems and their effects on human health is also important. And FDA cannot do this alone. This is an important topic area that requires both the agency's work with other agencies in the U.S. government, with other stakeholders nationally, and with other stakeholders internationally. Of course, these targets, which I then get to, will require continued coordinated efforts, and specifically with our sister agencies, NIH, NIST, and then the other stakeholders that I've mentioned. A large part of the U.S. government coordination should be facilitated by NNI, the National Nanotechnology Initiative. And through the NNI, we can exchange scientific information on this important product area. But I believe as this product area speeds up, it will need more efficient and effective coordination at the NNI level, as well as with the cooperation and collaboration with academia, manufacturers, and our counterparts overseas. Now, some of you may have heard that for the first time, FDA has received a proposed budget for 2011 dedicated to nanotechnology. And I would encourage all attendees to review the NNI publication that discussed and was recently released regarding this potential investment. Our very own nanotechnology task force identified 3 priority areas for additional resources to address key product review and safety issues associated with the products we regulate that can be impacted by nanotechnology. First, laboratory capacity to assess nanotechnology products and their safety. It's important to have the right equipment at the agency, the right staffing at the agency to do our own independent tests in collaboration with receiving the information that we get from manufacturers. Secondly, an important component of this program will be scientific staff development and training. It's important, and it was also mentioned in the task force report that I'll be discussing in a moment, that having the right expertise, maintaining that expertise is critical if the agency is to provide the oversight and regulation to this new emerging science product area. And third, foster a collaborative and interdisciplinary research program to address product characterization and safety. And this would not simply be working between the centers within the agency, but it would also promote a program to work with centers and other government agencies, as well as with other academic centers. FDA believes that regulatory science is distinct from other forms of science in that, as opposed to investigator-initiated research, the purpose of regulatory science is to facilitate product reviews. And while FDA encourages promotion of and participation in research and other efforts to increase scientific understanding and to facilitate assessment of data needs for regulated products, such as activities should, where appropriate, this should be coordinated with and leveraged against activities by the other federal agencies. So what are some of the key challenges for our regulatory science program? And they include moving lab innovation to commercial product, such as that the FDA does not inhibit those products that can protect or promote the public health. And for example, the capacity to rapidly assess existing applications that improve safety, effectiveness, performance, or quality so that they transition from manufacture to market in as safe and efficient manner as possible. Or in addition, assessing materials, manufacturing and scale-up, production of medical-grade materials, having and maintaining a multidisciplinary safety and effectiveness expertise in-house or access to such expertise outside the agency, and facilitate the evaluation of nanotechnology to existing products that we already have a body of knowledge. Now, I previously mentioned how the FDA task force was involved in identifying these priority areas of research that, if funds would become available, we would target. I would like to now provide a little bit more background on this important group that meets regularly today. FDA initiated the task force back in 2006 to help assess questions with respect to FDA's regulatory authorities in light of the current state of the science of nanotechnology. Representatives exist from across the agency, and the primary goal is to evaluate the adequacy of FDA's regulatory authorities in light of the current state of the emerging science. The task force also serves to communicate experience and review considerations across the agency and share product review experience among the staff. The original task force charge, when it was established, was to assess the current state of science, assess the regulatory approaches and authorities towards products containing nanoscale materials, help guide science and technology, strengthen collaborative relationships, facilitate the development and approval of safe and effective FDA-regulated products, enhance communication with the public, hold public meetings, and come out with a report in 2007. Our past FDA commissioner was fully engaged with the potential for nanotechnology upon cancer therapy and imaging. And in establishing the task force, the commissioner wanted to make sure that a regulatory pathway not only exists for cancer therapies, but for other products that are under FDA's jurisdiction. There were a number of considerations that the task force included in their review, and they include the following: evaluating the full range of use in FDA-regulated products. Nanomaterials may present challenges similar to other emerging technologies, and assess how size can impact safety, efficacy, and product quality. And I'm going to come back to the second bullet of how nanomaterials may present challenges similar to other emerging technologies. Now, one thing is certain: the science of nanomaterials continues to evolve, and it's been evolving since that report, and it continues to do so. Every day we see new potential uses for these materials in FDA-regulated products, and with potential new uses comes new questions. Some of the science issues that are important to FDA include the following: with regard to biological interactions, what properties impact biological interactions? Is the potency of a drug impacted by change in properties? What happens in the body with regard to biodistribution? And so I'm going to go through some of these questions that not only do the FDA staff ask, but we have discussions with the manufacturers that provide these products on the market through review to the consumer. With regard to safety testing, what is the dependency on size or other properties, and does the in vitro test necessarily equate to the same endpoint in vivo? What about methods for long-term assessment of health effects? With regard to properties versus toxicity, what changes in properties impact toxicity? Are there currently accepted methods for toxicity assessment applicable? What are the other important toxicity questions that still need to be addressed per product? For measurement and detection, what are the standards for nanomaterials? What are the types of measurements needed in biosystems and product quality? And for product quality, a few product quality issues that include scale-up from the laboratory to full production, quality assurance, purity, the size distribution, and the consistency. And all these needs to be addressed, and all are important science issues when discussing this emerging field, the definition, and the approach to take in regulating this important area. Now, the FDA Task Force published a report which is available online at fda.gov and addresses both scientific issues and regulatory policy issues. It consisted of the following: a synopsis of the state of the science for biological interactions of nanoscale materials, analysis and recommendations for science issues, and analysis for recommendations for regulatory policy issues. The findings included the following: nanoscale materials can be used in most product types regulated by FDA. Although nanoscale materials present challenges similar to other emerging technologies, additional considerations may emerge as materials enter and within the nanoscale. Additional challenges exist with regard to safety, efficacy, metrology, characterization, and industrialization, and steps should be taken to better inform all stakeholders about what is known, needed, and expected. It may also be helpful to know that the Nanotechnology Task Force spent considerable time on whether FDA needed a definition or not. It did not adopt a definition, nor did it find to be appropriate to adopt a definition for what we knew and what we still continue to know of this emerging science area today. It's important to take, as a result, a broad, inclusive approach in light of the regulatory authorities at FDA, focusing on the relevant science, those questions that I've just mentioned, product data, and other information that needs to be evaluated, which might be restrictive with a single focused definition. It's also important to address the material size and the state of science of the nanoscale material in question when it comes to FDA-regulated products. Not only is size important, but the biological properties imparted for any given material are equally important, and how that interacts in biological systems. So in addition, there's an additional finding of critical need to learn more, and only then can we modify our approach and adapt our approach, if appropriate, to regulate the various products containing nanomaterials. The take-home message is that we are very much interested in all these products that are under our authorities at the nanoscale range, as well as those products that might be larger than the nanoscale, but have associated nanoscale phenomena. Here I thought it would be important to highlight from the literature some products that have already been identified that contain nanomaterials, including the following: food ingredients and drugs, sunscreen materials, implant materials, drug delivery products, medical imaging products, antimicrobials, food and beverage container applications. There are a number of science recommendations from the task force report that include the following: the need for understanding biological interaction and properties of nanomaterials. So despite not having a definition, there are still specific questions that we need to know about these materials and how they interact in the biological matrices. It's important to promote measurement and detection of nanomaterials, the critical need to evaluate specific products and their review categories. We must continue to build in-house scientific expertise and maintain that expertise, such as in the task force. And there's value in the regulatory coordination for products containing nanomaterials within the agency, across the USG, nationally with other stakeholders, manufacturers, the public, and our counterparts overseas. A few additional science recommendations include the importance to assure the adequacy of safety, efficacy, and quality of products that may contain nanoscale materials. the value in standardizing the characterization procedures and improved standards for products that may contain such materials, and developing models for the behavior of nanoscale materials in vitro and in vivo. Now I'd like to spend just a little time on the current review process. For those products regulated by FDA, a primary focus is on product safety and efficacy, as well as product quality and performance as appropriate. Current product review process includes a case-by-case review where products are evaluated individually. That being said, FDA will continue to evaluate its regulations for any given product area and when impacted by an emerging science area such as nanotechnology. And it will continue to evaluate case-by-case approach with the potential for class or group-based approaches once sufficient information exists on the various questions that have gone through on the prior slides. And if such an approach is appropriate, where sufficient data and understanding are available to indicate that approach. A few additional review considerations include the need to understand general risks of products using nanoscale material, a greater need for understanding both the free nanoscale material behavior as well as solid materials with surface nanoscale features, and the need for collection of data at pre- and post-market phases of product development, both the risk observed in pre-market review as well as the risk experienced post-market, including those at the manufacturing level. I would like to now note that we have an active research program in the following areas. We plan to augment these programs should additional funding become available, and I've discussed how such funding would be targeted earlier in the presentation. We're also interested in providing more information about our current research program in these areas that relate to the products that we regulate for regulatory science to the public, and for this, we've been updating our website to capture some of our research interest areas, and we hope to add to that website the studies and the publications that we have to date in those varied product areas. Interestingly, the above research areas where we are interested overlap with other agencies in the United States government, specifically under the environmental health and safety activities, for the majority managed by the NEHI working group at the NNI level. And so we hope to augment our research in these areas which we have existing activity in, both risk and characterization information to determine and classify nanomaterials based on physical and chemical properties, in vitro and in vivo assay models to predict in vivo human responses to nanomaterial exposures, methods to quantify and characterize exposure to nanomaterials and characterize those nanomaterials in biological matrices, absorption and transport in the body studies, and the relationships between properties of nanomaterials and how they affect uptake via the lungs, skin, and other areas of the body. I also understand that yesterday there was some discussion about ethical, legal, and societal implications of nanotechnology. And I would like to note that FDA has recently participated in several public meetings, public workshops, focused on the state of the art in a number of overarching research need areas, including instrumentation, metrology, risk management, human health, and LC implications. This is in addition to the prior public meetings both in 2006 and 2008, as well as the other public meetings that we regularly engage on, such as in the forum here at Notre Dame. All the workshops were offered for open registration, available to the public as well as other stakeholders, and are intended to build a dialogue and strengthen the collaboration in these important areas of nanotechnology. They also aim to discuss the state of the science to assess the progress made and identify the prioritized gaps and trends as related to the NNI strategy for environmental health and safety research. So for example, in the latest workshop, in the risk management and LC workshop, we discussed what are the risk management needs currently and for the future. We discussed what are the LC needs currently and for the future. And we also asked the public, the attendees, which was represented by a number of different stakeholders, what additional information do we need? Interestingly, with regard to FDA, because FDA chaired the last meeting with EPA, and then we were also in the planning team, Charles Geraci and Sally Tinkle were also part of this planning team. We had risk characterization information session that particularly was relevant to the types of questions that we would be interested in at the Food and Drug Administration. And we hope to have those reports available of those workshops soon. I would encourage those interested about these workshops to go online to www.nano.gov for an agenda, for other information, and also for when the reports are released. The FDA Nanotechnology Task Force has also recognized that the international collaboration is required if the field is to move forward on a global level, and the U.S. has made an active effort to engage where opportunities exist. I see that there was there's some discussion on cosmetics. It may be helpful to know that there's an international cooperation on cosmetics regulation working group that FDA is participating on with other stakeholders in the industry and overseas, and they are discussing different issues that are of interest, such as labeling, such as definitions, such as other topics relevant to the cosmetics sector. And so I've spoken about some of the agency activities as well as cooperation across the USG. Another opportunity that exists at the international level is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, working parties on manufactured nanomaterials and nanotechnology. Both address important areas of this emerging science, and the US FDA is in particularly actively sought to engage on this front. A second is the International Standards Organizations, and specifically the ISO Technical Committee 229, where standardization in the fields of terminology, testing, is also discussing of the focus of which FDA has been a participant of. I would also like to mention that there are other opportunities for cooperation and collaboration overseas, and that the FDA, while with limited resources, is carefully evaluating where it can increase the capability and capacity of the agency. So in conclusion, FDA product areas containing nanotechnology continue to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis with the potential for a class-based approach as appropriate. FDA regulates a range of products that may contain nanomaterials using a range of regulatory authorities. Not all the regulatory authorities are the same across all the product areas. Continuing to develop a comprehensive approach to evaluating safety, effectiveness, and quality in products regulated by FDA is important. In addition, the need for additional guidance and data with public input is important to us. We hope to act on that very soon, and we hope to respond to that need very shortly. We realize that many stakeholders are interested in the current thoughts of the agency on these important topic areas across the products that we regulate. And FDA continues to stress the importance of early communication with industry. If there are questions that industry has about whether a product can be marketed, we encourage those manufacturers to come to us to talk. A few final thoughts. FDA is still evaluating at this time how, as a class, the safety of some nanomaterials will compare with that of conventionally scaled materials. FDA is presently unaware of any data to date that supports the finding that, as a class of products, that nanoscales present greater or less than safety concerns than products associated without those materials. And therefore, our approach has been an inclusive approach to look at this area on a case-by-case basis with the intent to move to a class-based approach if appropriate. There is no question that this is an important topic and a challenging area before the agency for all the products that are regulated by FDA. In 2007, the Nanotechnology Task Force concluded that the agency's authorities are generally comprehensive for products subject to pre-market authorization requirements such as drugs, biological products, devices, and food and color additives, and that these authorities give FDA the ability to obtain detailed scientific information needed to review the safety and, as appropriate, effectiveness of products it regulates. As science matures and develops, the FDA will continue to evaluate and adapt the regulatory framework and approaches to the needs of the products we regulate, including those that contain nanomaterials. While additional information is needed to evaluate such products that may contain nanomaterials or be end products of nanomaterials, we will continue to work with other governments, academia, the public, and international organizations, including our regulatory counterparts overseas, to update our regulatory approaches, and we will do what is needed to make sure that the products that we regulate meet our safety and effectiveness requirements. And I think with that, I have to yield my time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Currently, when a patient takes a drug, the waste from the patient, including examples such as radioactive iodine, carcinogens, which are cancer chemotherapeutics, and hormonally active compounds, are released via ordinary refuse mechanisms. First question, what challenges do you see in this area? And the second question, how does the FDA interface with the EPA and OSHA on this problem?
Okay, so I guess if we're talking about a drug product, maybe it has a number of different surface components to target that drug product. I think that there are specific questions related to the biological interaction of that product in the humans with respect to absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. Those are the types of biodistribution questions that we would find important, not only for the total end product, but each of the components, because there's this debate of having an NNI definition of 1 to 100, and some manufacturers think, oh, if my product's bigger, then it's not really nano. So understanding how the total product interacts and what happens to it in the human body is important, but also understanding how the individual components, which may break down, is also a key question for the agency to address in the pre-market review of that potential drug product. The second question is, you indicated, how do we interface with EPA and OSHA? So right now, our primary interface is at the National Nanotechnology Initiative umbrella framework that we meet with regularly once a month, if not more so. We also, FDA informally talks and meets with EPA, CPSC, and when appropriate, OSHA, as matters come up and come to bear that need our attention. Yeah.
I think he was there
Oh,
first.
okay. Sorry.
I was curious, one of our speakers, Alfred Nordman, talked a little bit about how, given all the uncertainty that we face surrounding toxicology of nanomaterials and so on, that in some ways it might be fruitful to think about introducing nanomaterials as a kind of collective societal experiment where we see what happens, collect information as we go, and so on. And so you mentioned on one of your slides the FDA is also interested in sort of post-market looking at risk and so on. And so I was curious if there are approaches in place to kind of track, see what happens with particular products where you may not have a whole great deal of information at present, but to sort of see what happens. I just wanted to get your thoughts on how the FDA is approaching that.
Yeah, I think for products like drugs, there's a surveillance system in place. For products with less pre-market authority, like cosmetics, we have no pre-market review authority over that area. So FDA bears the burden of identifying a problem with that product area after it's on the market. I think there's a challenge here with FDA having different regulatory authorities for different products we regulate, and it's the world we're working within, the framework that we're working within, and it's a challenging situation.
This is a related question. In view of the lack of knowledge and the complexities we've learned about in these 2 days here of getting relevant and appropriate information about toxicity and so on, I'm wondering what kind of guidance there is for companies in their pre-market review and the information they provide to the FDA. What kind of guidance do they have of how to carry out their investigation and what they should be reporting?
Sure. I think in some of the medical product areas, there has already been a lot of attention towards small molecules in the drug side, where there exists sort of a standard way of evaluating these products, which may happen to contain nanomaterial or nanomaterial size components. So in some areas, there is an adequate infrastructure for evaluating this pre-market. There are standardized ways we work with manufacturers to make sure that they have the right data in place, make sure that the clinical studies that are conducted are done appropriately. So I think there are safeguards in place for various product areas that may contain these materials. Of course, it would be much better to have specific statements. I think that the Nanotech Task Force was a very good report in that while it did not define the definition of nanotechnology, it provided the types of questions that we would be interested in addressing those questions about safety, especially, and effectiveness for the products that contain nanomaterials, the biological interactions type information that I listed, the particular product testing information that's also provided in the task force report helps to give the manufacturer some indication of the types of information they would need to have if we're reviewing a pre-market or for those products that don't have pre-market review, the types of testing that they should have in place before they market their product. Because if a manufacturer, so for example in cosmetics, provides a product to the market, that product cannot be harmful or injurious. I mean, it'll be misbranded if that product is on the market. For them to be aware of that, they need to have the appropriate testing in place prior to providing that product on the market.
I have one suggestion and one question. The suggestion is Health and Human Services has an excellent database on all products, all consumer products. You click on a product, it tells you the ingredients, and you click on the ingredient, it tells you all the toxicological effects. Something similar nature one can create. Again, if you click on titanium dioxide, you get thousands of products. And these are the products that are grandfathered in. The company will tell you it's not a nano, it's a macro particle. They will give you a low resolution microscope and show you that it's a 100 micron particle or a 2 micron particle. You look under high resolution microscope, they are clusters of small crystallites. So how are you going to deal with products that are already existing? Or you are going to regulate only the new products?
Yeah, I think for products that contain components that are nanoscale, there is some information that would be provided in a submission that speaks to the size of the material, material specifications. For products that are already on the market that may have a size distribution in the nanoscale range, for products like in the foods category, there would already be safety testing of that product with that size distribution, such that if the manufacturer changes the product size distribution from one size to a much lower size in the nanoscale, that would be something that we would have to take a look at and we would be interested in, especially if the identity of the product has been changed.
There are several questions posed in your presentation. I was just wondering if you could speculate what agencies you think should be or will be responsible for funding the research to answer those questions.
So for the types of questions that I provided on some of the slides, let me go through. There's one slide in particular. I think a lot of these research areas, areas of interest, speak very specifically and speak very closely to those of interest to the FDA. But at the same time, there may be overlap with our other sister institutes like NIH, perhaps NSF, and there may be other centers outside of the U.S. government, academic centers, that can also work collaboratively with FDA to address. I think that FDA cannot do this research and address these questions alone. It needs to be done with and in collaboration with other agencies as well as outside the government with academic centers. I think it's a shared collaborative type of research endeavor that needs to be evaluated on who best takes the lead, where is their collaboration, and where is their additional support to carry out that study or research. Sure. Yep.
That's one real quick. I actually just have a question about, maybe it's a historical question about the FDA. It seems like there are kind of two questions that are related. One is a sort of novelty question. Is this thing new? And then secondly, what is it? And it seems like you could identify sometimes you're going to answer those questions together, and sometimes you're going to answer them separately. So I was wondering if you could think of a recent product where you were like, oh, this is new, and then decided how to regulate it, or one where it was really the case you really needed to know what it is before you could do anything. So maybe the question is something like, do these questions always have to be answered together, and can you think of a time when they were not? And maybe an example.
I think it depends upon the product. So if you're talking about a medical device area, you might have a product that is contains a coating that's been conventionally scaled. And so now you have a manufacturer that has a similar type product with a new coating that might have a component or a particle size inclusion that's within the nanoscale. Is this new? Could be. What is it? We'd want to know. How does that affect safety and effectiveness? Can we use the traditional body of evidence to answer those two questions, or what components of that traditional body of evidence is applicable to finding out a little bit more about those two questions? Is this new, and what is it? If you have a brand new medical device product that has been nanostructured in the nanoscale range, maybe a little larger than nanoscale range, that doesn't have maybe a predicate, you haven't seen it before. Is this new? Probably, because it'll be used for therapeutic purposes. What is it? We'd want to know. So those would be tied. I guess maybe the distinction comes from when you compare products that you have some body of knowledge where you're adding or enhancing to it versus a brand new identity of something that you have less knowledge for, and you have to ask, maybe you may have to ask more questions about.
Well, we'll have more questions after the last speaker, whom we'll hear after our break in a moment here. So why don't we take about a 10-minute break and then hear our last speaker and then have the time for discussion. But thanks again.